The morning rush was already in full motion when a strange tension settled over a small family diner, one that no one seemed to notice. Among the clattering plates, the smell of fresh coffee and the buzz of conversations, a young boy sat slumped in his chair, his breathing shallow, his eyes unfocused. People glanced his way, but no one really saw him. It was as if his quiet suffering blended into the background noise, ignored, overlooked, dismissed as the ordinary exhaustion of a child. But what happened next would flip the entire diner upside down and remind everyone watching today why one person's courage can change everything. Welcome back to Swift Tale, the channel where we bring powerful, emotional stories to life. And if you're visiting for the very first time, pause for a moment and ask yourself, have you liked, shared, and subscribed yet? If not, make sure to hit that button. It really helps our growing community and ensures you never miss a story that could stay with you long after the video ends. Today's story dives deep into a moment that almost everyone ignored. A struggling mother, exhausted from life's weight, trying to enjoy one simple meal with her son. Customers who were too consumed with their own lives to notice the danger unfolding only a few feet away. And a boy whose symptoms quietly screamed for help, symptoms that steadily worsened while the world around him remained oblivious. Yet in the middle of that chaos stood a black waitress, overworked, underappreciated, and overlooked, who saw something no one else did. She noticed the boy's pallor, his trembling fingers, the way he leaned into his mother not with affection but desperation. And in one bold moment, she stepped in. A decision that not only changed the course of that day, but very likely saved a life. In this introduction, I want you to understand exactly why this story matters. We live in a world full of noise, a world where rushing, stress, and distraction often steal our ability to truly see one another. The boy's suffering was visible yet invisible. People noticed but didn't act. They cared but didn't intervene. And this is something that happens far too often in real life. We assume someone else will step in, someone else will help, someone else will say something. But as you're about to see, it only takes one person, just one, to make all the difference. This story is about courage, compassion, and the power of refusing to ignore another human being in need. It's about how an ordinary person doing an ordinary job can become the hero of a moment that could have ended in tragedy. So as we begin this journey, settle in and watch closely. Every detail matters. Every moment builds toward the powerful turning point that changed everything. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why stepping forward, when everyone else steps back, can be the most heroic act of all. The sun was still rising, casting long streaks of gold across the windows of Miller's Diner, a small but beloved neighborhood spot known for its stacked pancakes and endless coffee refills. The morning rush was already at its peak. The bell above the door chimed non-stop as customers shuffled in, dragging behind them the exhaustion of early meetings, school drop-offs, and long night shifts. The air buzzed with overlapping conversations, the scrape of chairs across the floor, and the rhythmic sizzle of bacon on the grill. Every table was taken, every booth filled, and every staff member moved with the kind of practiced urgency that only came from surviving countless chaotic mornings just like this one. In the center booth, near the window sat a young mother and her son, two people who, on the surface, blended perfectly into the hectic scene. The mother, hair pulled back hastily and eyes shadowed with fatigue, looked like someone who hadn't had a full night of sleep in weeks. She kept glancing at her phone, not because she was distracted, but because she was trying to keep herself from worrying too visibly. Beside her, the boy slouched forward, elbows on the table, his small chest rising and falling too quickly for someone his age. His skin looked pale under the fluorescent lights, but in the blur of the morning crowd, no one noticed. Or if they did, they pushed the thought aside. There was simply too much happening all at once. A group of office workers occupied a booth across from them, laughing loudly as they scrolled through emails and joked about the day ahead. Two elderly men sat near the counter sipping coffee and discussing last night's game, barely lifting their eyes from their mugs. The servers weaved expertly between tables, balancing plates of French toast and omelets, offering refills and exchanging polite smiles with customers who barely acknowledged their presence. It was a typical morning, busy, noisy, predictable. But underneath all that normalcy, something was wrong. The boy kept shifting uncomfortably, pressing a hand against his stomach as if trying to soothe an ache he couldn't explain. Sweat gathered at his temples despite the cool air from the overhead vents. His mother reached over now and then, brushing his hair back, whispering reassurances that didn't seem to ease his growing discomfort. She noticed the small signs. She wasn't blind to her son's unusual state, but she convinced herself it was just hunger or maybe fatigue from staying up late with schoolwork. After all, she didn't want to cause a scene or appear dramatic in a place full of strangers. One of the waitresses paused as she passed their table, glancing at the boy briefly before rushing off to deliver an order. She noticed something, she just didn't have the time to process it. Customers at another table watched the boy wipe his forehead with the back of his sleeve, but they shrugged it off, assuming he had a fever or maybe a bad cold. In a world where everyone was rushing, everyone silently assumed someone else would step in if things got truly serious. The noise of the diner grew louder as more people packed inside. A toddler cried in the corner, a blender roared behind the counter, and the cooks exchanged shouts over the sizzling grill. It was the kind of noise that drowned out everything else, including the faint, shaky breaths of a boy trying his best not to faint. Even the natural protectiveness of strangers became muted under the weight of their own distractions. From the booth, the mother looked around the diner and tried to convince herself that everything was okay. She didn't want to draw attention. She didn't want people staring. She didn't want to become a burden in a place where everyone already seemed stretched thin. So she smiled weakly at her son and held his hand, hoping it was just a momentary episode that would pass. But as the minutes ticked by, the boy's condition worsened, unnoticed by a room full of people who were too busy, too distracted, or too disconnected to see how serious things were becoming. The diner continued its morning routine, oblivious to the fact that a quiet emergency was unfolding right in its center, one that needed only a single caring eye to recognize the truth. Little did anyone know that among the sea of rushing customers and overworked staff, there was one person, the black waitress who would soon change everything, who was starting to sense that something wasn't right. As the minutes passed, the rhythm of the diner seemed to grow louder, faster, more chaotic, but for the boy in the window booth, everything felt like it was slowing down. His vision blurred at the edges, colors fading into one another as if he were looking through rippled glass. His breathing grew shallow and uneven, little gasps escaping between each breath. His small hands trembled uncontrollably on the tabletop, his fingers curling inward like he was trying to grip onto something that wasn't there. His mother leaned closer, her brow furrowing with concern. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" she whispered, brushing her hand across his forehead. The moment her palm touched his skin, her heart jolted. He was burning up, yet his body trembled like he was freezing. She swallowed hard, anxiety rising in her chest, but she forced a calm expression. She didn't want him to panic. She didn't want to panic herself. "Mom, I feel weird," he murmured, his voice thin, strained, almost swallowed by the noise around them. The mother offered a trembling smile. "Maybe you just need to eat something, baby. Your pancakes will be here soon." But the boy didn't even nod. His eyes drifted downward, his body swaying slightly. The mother tightened her grip on his hand, worry tightening around her like a vice. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, but she hesitated, unsure whether to make a scene. Everyone seemed so busy, and she didn't want to cause a commotion over what she hoped was just a sudden dizzy spell. At the nearby table, a pair of college-aged students, medical students, no less, glanced over. One of them noticed the boy's pale complexion, the sheen of sweat on his forehead. He nudged his friend. "Hey, doesn't that kid look off?" he whispered. His friend glanced briefly, shrugged, and returned to scrolling through his phone. "Probably just sick. His mom's right there, she'll handle it." And so they turned away, their brief moment of concern fading into the background hum of casual conversation. At the counter, an elderly woman stirred her coffee distractedly. She had noticed the boy too. She'd seen his head droop forward, seen the mother's anxious glances, but she told herself it wasn't her place to interfere. "Parents know best," she muttered under her breath, trying to reassure herself. Meanwhile, the boy's symptoms escalated. His chest tightened painfully, each breath becoming a desperate effort. He leaned heavily into his mother, clutching her sleeve. His lips began to lose their color, taking on a faint bluish tint that no one had bothered to look closely enough to notice. The mother's panic grew. "Jacob, honey, look at me," she said softly, lifting his chin with trembling fingers. His eyes fluttered open for a moment, unfocused, distant, as if he were struggling to keep consciousness tethered to him. He blinked slowly, his head drooping again almost immediately. A cold fear settled into her stomach. She looked around the diner, hoping someone, anyone, would notice something she didn't have the courage to call out. But everyone was consumed by the noise, by their meals, by their routines. People were talking, laughing, scrolling, chewing, and not one of them saw how serious the moment had become. A small thud startled her. Jacob's fork had slipped from his hand, clattering onto the table before falling toward the floor. He didn't even react. His hand simply trembled in place, limp and weak. That's when the mother's voice cracked. "Please, Jacob, say something," she whispered, her fear finally spilling out. But his response was only a soft, strangled sound. Across the room, a group of co-workers paused mid-conversation when the fork hit the ground. They glanced over briefly. "Kid, probably just tired," one of them said dismissively. Another shook her head. "Or hungover," she joked, and the group laughed, turning their attention back to their food. The idea that a child could be in real danger simply didn't cross their minds. Even the staff remained oblivious. A young waiter rushed past the table with a tray of coffees, nearly slipping as he avoided a toddler running through the aisle. He gave the boy and his mother a sympathetic glance, but kept going. He was already late getting drinks to table 7, and the manager had been on edge all morning. The diner was a sea of motion, of errands, of schedules, too full of life to notice someone quietly losing theirs. The mother held her son now, her voice trembling as she whispered to him again and again, "Stay with me, baby, please stay with me." But he was barely responding. His breathing came out in short, shallow pulses. His skin was clammy, drained of color. His head bobbed forward, threatening to drop completely. And still, no one stepped forward. No one except for one person. One person who had walked past that booth 3 times now, each time feeling a tightening in her chest, a whisper of intuition telling her that something wasn't right. One person who couldn't shake the image of that pale face, those trembling fingers, the terrified mother trying to hold everything together alone. The black waitress who had been juggling orders, cleaning spills, and delivering plates all morning was now slowing down near their booth, her eyes narrowing with concern. She didn't know exactly what was wrong, but she knew something was, something serious. And in just a few moments, she would be the only person in that entire diner who chose to act. The only one willing to step away from the noise. The only one willing to step toward the danger everyone else ignored. She was about to change everything. The waitress everyone seemed to overlook was named Vanessa Thompson, a woman whose presence blended into the background of the diner as seamlessly as the aroma of brewing coffee. She had been working at Miller's Diner for nearly 3 years, and in that time, she had become a quiet anchor in a place constantly overwhelmed by the morning rush. Most customers barely noticed her beyond her polite smile or the warmth in her voice when she asked how their day was going. To many, she was simply the waitress, someone refilling their cups, taking their orders, and moving briskly between tables with practiced grace. But behind that gentle demeanor was a woman shaped by resilience, intuition, and a lifetime of learning to pay attention to the quiet things others often missed. Vanessa had grown up in a home where caring for others wasn't optional, it was survival. She had helped raise her younger siblings while her single mother worked double shifts. When she was 13, her little brother experienced a sudden health crisis that nearly cost him his life. She still remembered the helplessness in her mother's eyes, the frantic rush to the hospital, the cold weight of fear that had pressed against her chest so painfully that night. From that moment on, she became the one who watched closely, who noticed when someone was pale or too quiet or breathing oddly. She learned to read the silent signals that precede disaster. Because once you've lived through something like that, you never forget the signs. That morning, Vanessa's shift had started like any other. She arrived early, tucked her braids neatly under her cap, tied her apron with steady hands, and prepared herself for the usual chaos. The diner wasn't just her workplace, it was her stability, her routine, her refuge. She knew which regulars preferred black coffee, who liked extra whipped cream, who never tipped, and who always left a handwritten thank you note. She moved through the space with the ease of someone who had long since memorized every corner, every creaky floorboard, every shortcut. But as she carried a tray loaded with scrambled eggs and toast past the window booth, something tugged at her attention. The boy. The first time she passed him, she caught only a glimpse, a pale face, a drooping head, a mother's hand brushing across his forehead. She hesitated for half a second, long enough for a flicker of concern to pass through her mind, but the demands of the rush pulled her away before she could dwell on it. The second time she noticed his breathing, too quick, too shallow, his small chest rising and falling with uncomfortable effort. She paused again, brows knitting together, but a burst of laughter from the group at table 9 shook her from her thoughts. More customers were walking in. Someone was calling her name. She kept moving. The third time, she couldn't ignore it. As she approached the booth again, Vanessa saw the boy's fingers trembling violently against the table, his knuckles white as he tried to steady himself. She noticed his lips. They were losing color. His forehead glistened with cold sweat. Her heart stuttered in her chest, memories of her brother overlapping the scene in front of her so vividly she almost felt dizzy. Something is wrong. He needs help. Why isn't anyone doing anything? Vanessa slowed her steps until she came to a stop near their table. The mother looked up at her briefly, offering a strained smile that didn't come close to hiding the panic in her eyes. Vanessa recognized that look, the desperate attempt to stay calm when everything inside you is screaming. She knelt slightly, just enough to be eye level with the boy. "Hey there, sweetheart," she said softly. "Are you feeling okay?" The boy didn't answer. His eyes fluttered weakly, his breathing ragged. The mother swallowed hard. He's been feeling off this morning. I thought he was just tired, but he's getting worse." Vanessa placed a gentle hand on the table, steadying herself as her instincts sharpened. "How long has he been like this?" The mother hesitated. "A few minutes, maybe more. I didn't want to bother anyone. People are so busy, and I thought maybe it was just—" "No," Vanessa interrupted gently but firmly, her voice lowering. "You're not bothering anyone. Something's not right. He needs help." For a moment, the mother's composure cracked completely, relief mixed with fear in her eyes. Someone had finally noticed. Someone saw what she had been too scared to say out loud. Vanessa straightened, glancing around the diner. Everyone else was still wrapped up in their own world, eating, laughing, scrolling. Not one pair of eyes was on the boy. It angered her in a quiet, controlled way, not because people were cruel, but because people didn't pay attention until it was too late. "Not on my watch," she thought. She took a step closer to the mother, lowering her voice. "I'm going to get help. We're going to take care of him. Stay with him, okay?" The mother nodded rapidly, gripping her son's hand as Vanessa spun around and headed toward the counter. Her pace quickened with each step, her heart thudding with urgency. She didn't know exactly what was wrong, but she knew enough to understand that waiting any longer could be dangerous. And as she hurried toward the manager to call for emergency assistance, she made a silent promise to herself. If no one else was going to step in, then she would. No hesitation. No second guessing. Not this time, not ever again. Because sometimes all it takes to save a life is one person who refuses to look away. Vanessa's footsteps were quick but controlled as she approached the counter, her breath tightening with urgency. The diner's noise seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the rising line of her intuition screaming that something was dangerously wrong. She reached the counter and caught the manager's attention, a middle-aged man named Chris, who was flipping through receipts with the frazzled agitation that came from too many mornings like this. "Chris," she said firmly, her voice low but intense, "we have a problem at booth 5. He didn't look up immediately. "Make it quick, Vanessa, we're backed up and—" "This is serious," she cut in, her tone sharper than she intended. There's a kid in trouble. He's not breathing right. He's pale, sweating, unresponsive. I think he might be having a medical emergency." That finally made him freeze. Chris lifted his eyes, stunned by her urgency. Vanessa wasn't the type to exaggerate. She wasn't dramatic. She wasn't careless with her words. If she said something was wrong, it meant there was really something wrong. "What do you need?" he asked, voice suddenly calmer. "I need someone to call 911, she said without hesitation. "Now." Her certainty jolted him. He reached for the phone immediately, dialing emergency services with trembling hands. Meanwhile, Vanessa turned back toward the booth, her heart pounding as she broke into a swift walk, weaving through the tables with purpose. The mother's face lit up with desperate relief the moment she saw Vanessa coming back. Her hands shook as she held her son, who now leaned against her shoulder, barely conscious. "I called for help," Vanessa said gently as she reached the booth. "Paramedics are on their way." "Thank you," the mother whispered, her voice cracking. "I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to cause a scene." "There's no scene too big when it comes to your child," Vanessa replied softly. "You did the right thing by saying something. Now let's keep him awake." She knelt beside the boy again, this time fully focused, her professional duties momentarily forgotten. She wasn't worried about orders, spilled drinks, or impatient customers anymore. This little boy mattered more. "Sweetheart," she said softly, "can you hear me?" The boy's eyelids fluttered weakly, his breathing hitched, and a soft wheeze escaped him. The sound made Vanessa's stomach drop. It was too familiar. A sound she had heard once before when her brother nearly collapsed at school years ago. She felt the weight of the memory pressing down on her. She couldn't let history repeat itself. "Stay with us, baby," the mother whispered, stroking his hair. "Please stay with us." Nearby customers finally started to notice. Chairs shifted, conversations paused, a silence rippled through the nearest tables. For the first time since entering the diner, their attention focused on something beyond their plates and screens. "What's going on? Is he okay? Oh my God, look at him." Vanessa didn't care about the sudden audience. She cared about the child in front of her, the panic rising in his mother's throat, and the haunting reminder of how fragile a moment like this could be. "Ma'am," Vanessa said, looking up at the mother, "does he have any conditions, allergies, anything like that?" The mother shook her head frantically. "He's usually healthy, but this morning he woke up looking a little pale. I thought it was nothing. I thought breakfast would help." Vanessa nodded. She understood. Parents were human. Sometimes fear disguised itself as denial. Sometimes exhaustion made you hope the problem would disappear on its own. She reached out and gently placed a hand on the boy's back, feeling the rapid pace of his breathing beneath her palm. "He's fighting really hard right now," she murmured, "but he's holding on." The mother wiped tears from her eyes. "I should have done something. I should have." "You're doing something now," Vanessa said firmly. "That's what matters." The boy's body slumped slightly, and the mother gasped. Vanessa reacted instantly, lifting him just enough to keep his airway open. "Try to stay with me, sweetheart," she encouraged, her voice warm and steady. "I'm right here." People around them began to stand, some covering their mouths with their hands, others whispering anxiously. A few pulled out their phones, instinctively filming, but Vanessa shot them a look so sharp and powerful that several lowered their phones in shame. "This is a child," she said calmly but firmly. "Put the cameras away." The authority in her voice sent chills through the people watching. Vanessa, who had been invisible a moment ago, now commanded the entire room without raising her voice. The sound of the manager calling out echoed across the diner. "Paramedics are on the way. They said they'll be here in 3 minutes." 3 minutes? It might as well have been an hour. Vanessa turned back to the boy, her heart racing as his eyelids fluttered closed again. The mother gave a panicked cry. "No, no, Jacob, baby, stay with me." Vanessa gently tapped the boy's shoulder. "Come on, sweetheart, keep your eyes open for me, okay? You're doing so good." His lips parted slightly, a broken whisper escaping him. "Mom." The mother choked on a sob. "I'm here, baby, I'm right here." Vanessa's voice softened, her words slow and rhythmic. "Good job, stay with your mom, you're not alone." In that moment, Vanessa wasn't just a waitress. She wasn't just an employee. She wasn't just a bystander. She was the only person in a room full of onlookers who had stepped forward without hesitation. And as the faint sound of approaching sirens drifted in through the diner's windows, Vanessa knew one thing with absolute certainty. Her voice, her decision to speak up, had just saved this boy's life, the boy's condition, and the moment the waitress's observations become impossible to ignore. As the restaurant grows louder with the lunchtime rush, the boy's breathing becomes more erratic, his skin turning blotchy and his voice weakening between shallow breaths. His mother, now visibly distressed, tries to comfort him, still unsure whether she's overreacting or whether something serious is taking place. That uncertainty begins to crumble when the waitress returns to their table with the same worried expression she had earlier. But this time, her concern is firm, urgent, and unmistakable. She kneels beside the boy, noticing the swelling in his hands and the subtle droop in his eyelids, signs she recognizes immediately from past experiences she had growing up caring for siblings with severe allergies. The mother starts to panic, but the waitress speaks calmly, getting her step by step through what's happening and what must be done. She explains that the boy is showing signs of an allergic reaction that has been progressing silently, likely triggered long before he even stepped into the restaurant. Without wasting a second, she calls over the manager, asks him to contact emergency services, and clears space around the boy so he can breathe more easily. Her leadership steadies the mother, who clings to the waitress's words and begins to grasp the seriousness of the situation. Customers nearby grow quiet as they realize a crisis is unfolding, but the waitress blocks out the noise, keeping her full attention on the boy, counting his breaths, checking his pulse, and speaking to him softly to keep him conscious. As the boy's condition worsens, the mother's fear turns into a mix of guilt and helplessness, but the waitress refuses to let despair take over. She stays by the boy's side until paramedics rush through the doors, and when they hear her detailed account of the symptoms and timeline, they nod in agreement, confirming that her quick action may have saved his life. In that moment, the mother finally understands the weight of what just happened. While everyone else ignored the signs, one woman chose to step in, listen, and act, and that choice changed everything. Emotional aftermath as the paramedics take over and the truth about the waitress's intervention begins to unfold. As the boy is placed onto the stretcher, his mother hovers beside him, trembling yet clinging to the hope the waitress helped revive. The paramedics work quickly, administering oxygen, checking his vitals, and preparing the necessary medication, yet even in their efficiency, they pause to acknowledge how critical the waitress's observations were. One of them looks at her and says something the mother will never forget. "If you hadn't acted when you did, this could have gone very differently." That simple sentence hits the mother harder than anything she's heard all day. She turns to the waitress with a mix of shock, gratitude, and emotional overwhelm. For the first time all day, she truly sees the woman who stood up when everyone else looked away. But the scene grows even heavier as the restaurant staff and customers begin to gather, watching the unfolding emergency with hushed voices. Whispers ripple through the room, some people expressing guilt for not paying attention, others apologizing under their breath, a few even stepping forward to thank the waitress for doing what they should have done. The waitress doesn't indulge in any spotlight. She simply wipes her palms on her apron, steady but shaken, humble, and relieved that the boy is now in professional hands. Even then, she doesn't walk away. She follows the mother outside, making sure she knows which hospital the boy is being taken to, ensuring the mother has her purse, keys, and phone, and comforting her like someone who's known her far longer than the past 20 minutes. The mother breaks down, finally letting herself cry, not just from fear, but from the realization that her son's life was nearly lost in plain sight while people brushed past him. She apologizes repeatedly, but the waitress gently stops her, telling her that being a parent doesn't mean catching everything, it means being there when it matters. The sincerity of those words settles into the mother's heart, grounding her amid the panic. As the ambulance doors close, one of the paramedics reassures her again, telling her they caught the reaction in time and that the boy has a strong chance of recovering quickly. The mother turns once more to the waitress, gripping her hands tightly, unable to express the depth of her gratitude, but trying anyway. This section marks the turning point where the gravity of the situation comes into full focus, not just medically, but emotionally and morally. It becomes clear that the waitress didn't just help, she changed the trajectory of an entire family's day and possibly their lives. Her actions, born from empathy and attentiveness, stand in stark contrast to the indifference that surrounded them moments earlier. And as the ambulance pulls away, the mother makes a silent promise to herself. She will never forget this woman, and she will never again ignore the signs that someone needs help. The emotional fallout and deeper revelations that unfold once the mother reaches the hospital with her son and begins to truly grasp the magnitude of what the waitress did. As the ambulance arrives, doctors rush the boy in for immediate treatment, confirming that he was in the early stages of anaphylaxis, a condition that can turn fatal in minutes if ignored. The mother, left alone in the waiting room, sits trembling in one of the hard plastic chairs, replaying every moment of the day in her mind. The early warning signs she shrugged off, the strangers who dismissed her concerns, and the single voice, a calm, steady waitress who insisted something was wrong. The weight of that realization sinks deep into her chest. She wonders how she could have missed the obvious, how she could have doubted her instincts, and how the one person everyone underestimated ended up being the only one who truly cared. As she waits, the hospital doors slide open and the waitress appears, still in her work uniform, slightly out of breath from rushing over after her shift ended. The mother stares at her in disbelief. She had expected the waitress to return to work, not chase her across town. But the waitress simply smiles, saying she wanted to make sure the boy was okay, that she wanted the mother to know she wasn't alone. This small act of kindness shatters the mother's emotional dam. She breaks down crying into the waitress's arms, overwhelmed by the generosity of someone who owed her nothing. The two sit together in the waiting room, sharing quiet moments of support as hours feel like days. When the doctor finally emerges, he delivers the news they've been praying for. The boy is stable, the reaction has been treated in time, and he will make a full recovery. The mother collapses forward in relief, thanking the doctor again and again. But then something happens that changes everything. The doctor points out that the waitress's quick identification of the reaction and immediate call for help dramatically reduced the severity of the boy's condition. In other words, she didn't just help, she prevented a tragedy. The mother turns to look at the waitress with awe, realizing she's not just someone who noticed a problem, she's someone who saved her child. But this section goes deeper than gratitude. As the mother and waitress talk, their stories unfold. The waitress reveals she grew up in a neighborhood where medical attention wasn't always accessible, where she learned early how to recognize the signs of allergic reactions because her younger brother suffered from severe allergies and often had episodes that were ignored by teachers, store clerks, and even neighbors. She learned to stay vigilant because she had no choice. And as she tells this story, the mother realizes the truth. The waitress saw what no one else saw today because she was trained by life to care in ways others never had to. The mother, humbled, listens with admiration and quiet shame, not because she failed, but because she realizes how much society overlooks people who carry wisdom born from struggle. She thanks the waitress again, promising that she will never forget her. They sit together while the boy sleeps peacefully in the hospital bed, and for the first time all day, the room feels safe, calm, and full of hope. Section 8 closes with a moment of connection, two women from different worlds, brought together by compassion, courage, and a child whose life now stretches forward, because someone chose to step in when others looked away. The emotional peak of the story, capturing how the boy's recovery becomes a moment of transformation, not just for his mother, but for the waitress and everyone involved. As hours pass in the hospital room, the boy slowly wakes up, weak but safe, his eyes blinking open to the sight of his mother holding his hand and the waitress standing nearby with a gentle smile. Confused at first, he asks what happened, and the mother carefully explains that he got very sick, but someone noticed what others didn't. She points to the waitress, telling him that she was the one who made sure he got help quickly. The boy looks at the waitress with quiet gratitude, whispering a simple thank you that carries more weight than anything said that day. The waitress kneels beside him, brushing his hair back gently, telling him he was brave and that he fought hard. It's a soft, grounding moment, one that leaves the mother watching them with a swelling heart. As the hours settle, the mother receives updates from nurses and doctors, each reaffirming how close they came to disaster and how crucial the waitress's actions were. The truth becomes painfully clear. If she hadn't insisted, hadn't spoken up against the dismissive attitudes, the outcome could have been tragic. The mother is struck not only by the waitress's knowledge, but by her courage to intervene, to stand firm when everyone else hesitated, to challenge assumptions and stereotypes, even when it could have resulted in her being ignored or even reprimanded. This realization digs deep into the mother's conscience. She reflects on how quickly others dismissed the waitress earlier, how some customers barely noticed her, how a few even spoke to her curtly, how people overlooked her presence because of her job or the color of her skin. Yet she was the only one who acted when it mattered. Moved by a sense of justice and gratitude, the mother decides she can't let what happened stay confined to that restaurant or this hospital room. She asks the waitress if she can speak with her manager, determined to make sure her heroism is recognized. The waitress tries to brush it off, saying she didn't do anything special, but the mother refuses to accept that. She calls the restaurant, explaining in detail what happened, making it clear that this woman didn't just provide good customer service, she saved a child's life. The manager, stunned, promises to address the matter properly and ensure the staff hears the story. Word begins to spread, and soon nurses and even other patients nearby start offering the waitress thanks and admiration. But Section 9 does more than highlight recognition. It dives into the bond forming between the mother and the waitress. They exchange stories, laughter, and tears as they sit by the boy's bedside. The mother shares how overwhelmed she's been raising her son alone, always fearing she'd miss something important. The waitress listens with compassion, telling her she did the right thing by fighting for her son, no matter how uncertain she felt in the moment. And in return, the mother tells the waitress that she deserves far more than the world has given her, that her instincts, her empathy, her experience are gifts that saved a life today. As the night settles into early morning, the waitress prepares to leave, needing rest after an emotionally exhausting day. The mother hugs her tightly, refusing to let go for a long moment, silently acknowledging the miracle of their encounter. She promises they will stay in touch, and the waitress smiles, telling her she'll check in tomorrow. Section 9 ends with the mother watching the waitress walk down the long hospital hallway, illuminated by soft fluorescent lights. Realizing that some people enter our lives for a moment but leave an impact that lasts forever, the story to its emotional and inspirational close, wrapping together the lessons, the transformation, and the impact of everything that happened. As morning sunlight filters through the hospital blinds, the mother sits quietly beside her son, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing, a sound she now treasures more than anything. She reflects on the whirlwind of the past day, the fear that nearly broke her, and the unexpected hero who restored her hope. When the doctor returns with the final update that her son is fully out of danger and ready to be discharged later in the afternoon, relief washes over her like a tide. But before they leave, she feels compelled to call the waitress one last time, not only to thank her again, but to share the good news. The waitress answers with warmth in her voice, happy to hear the boy is safe, and promises to stop by after her shift to see him. It's in this moment that the mother realizes something profound. Sometimes the people we underestimate, the ones overlooked by society, are the ones who hold the wisdom, empathy, and courage that make all the difference. As the day goes on, the staff who heard about what happened come by to congratulate the waitress, praising her initiative and quick action. She remains humble, insisting she only did what anyone should do, but everyone around her knows the truth. She did what most people didn't. When the mother reconnects with her at the hospital later, she tells her she intends to write a public tribute, not for attention, but to make sure the world hears about the kindness and bravery that saved her son's life. The waitress initially hesitates, uncomfortable with the spotlight, but the mother explains that stories like this matter, that people need reminders that compassion still exists, that everyday heroes still walk among us, and that paying attention can be the difference between life and tragedy. Slowly, the waitress agrees, touched by the mother's sincerity. Before leaving the hospital, the mother and son give the waitress a heartfelt goodbye. The boy wraps his arms around her, whispering a quiet thank you that makes her eyes well with tears. The mother promises that their paths won't end here, that they'll stay connected because what the waitress gave them wasn't just help, but hope. As they walk out into the bright afternoon light, the mother holds her son's hand tightly, filled with gratitude, perspective, and a renewed belief in the goodness of people. The conclusion then turns directly to the audience, inviting them to reflect on the deeper message of the story. How easy it is to overlook small signs, small voices, and people whose experiences and insights we fail to recognize. It emphasizes how paying attention, caring enough to act, and listening when others remain silent can literally change and even save lives. The narrator encourages viewers to treat people with kindness, to trust their instincts, and to notice the humanity in those around them. And finally, as the story wraps up, the tone shifts into your final call to action, thanking viewers for watching and reminding them that this channel, Swift Tale, brings powerful, meaningful stories to life every week. The audience is encouraged to like the video, share it with others who might need its message, subscribe for more storytelling content, and leave a comment about their thoughts or experiences with moments when someone unexpected stepped in and made a difference. This final section leaves viewers not just emotionally moved, but inspired, reminded that compassion is powerful, attention saves lives, and heroes can be found anywhere if we simply choose to look.